This is Forever Blue, an hour's Manchester City chat every week on XS Manchester 106.1 FM. I'm Ian Cheeseman. Alongside me is a City legend, that is Paul Lake. We've got nothing to talk about tonight, Lakey. Quiet week.
Yeah,
nothing happened last night, did it?
One tonight, Ian. Yeah, exactly.
Where do we start on this? I mean, there's so much to pick through, isn't there? I mean, there's the performance, there's the referee, there's the crowd trouble out of the FA Cup. Anything else you want to add to that list?
No, there's pretty much a lot to be going on with there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, we've got later on, just to tell you, we've got Rodney Marsh and Ian Bishop are both on the way. We're going to talk to a fan in a minute who was in the away end last night at Wigan. We've also got Kevin Parker from the official supporters club coming on to give us his verdicts as well. What did you make, first of all? Let's start with the thing that all the fans are talking about today, or at least that's how it feels to me. People contacting me on social media, which was what happened at the end of the game. Bad enough that the City lost the game, and we can pick our bones away through that and pick the bones out of that. But what happened at the end was something we haven't seen for a while, wasn't it? Pitch invasions and then a confrontation between home and away supporters.
Well, for me, I was concerned for the players' safety. Now, you know, with the best intentions in the world, you know, using the word banter is one thing. But when you're getting, you know, fans that you don't know who they are, they've been drinking, whatever, or anything else that they might have on them, you know, they could be throwing things. But if that was to, you know, had an impact, maybe someone had hurt, pushed, even, God forbid, even, you know, stabbed. You just don't know, do you, who's out there? You don't know who's out there at all. And the fact that these people were able to come on the pitch close to our players, you know, and the same would be with the Wigan players too, if it was a different team, you know. It was that fear that something might have happened, and the fact that it wasn't controlled. And there's something that no one can get away from, that fact, is getting these fans so close to our players, you know, and causing them, you know, that emotional distress, as well as potentially some physical harm. That was a real worry.
As a player, were you ever in that position where opposing fans came on the pitch as you were leaving the field?
Yeah, it's happened on quite a few occasions, and obviously you do your best just to get off the pitch.
Does it scare you?
It does, because, like I said, you just don't know who's around, and obviously the checks in stadia these days are quite robust, but in our day it wasn't. So you had people run to the pitch that could do anything to you. So it was a case of, as soon as you saw that, whether it was City fans or not, you had to do your best to get off. Now, at the end of the season, obviously you win the league. It's basically a lot of love in the air, so you're going to be okay in that situation. But in an opposing team's arena, you have to be so careful.
Now, I've seen the footage. I didn't see it at the time. I must admit, I was at the game, but I was actually running round to the away end as soon as the final whistle went to get reaction for the vlog that I do. And I wasn't aware of what was actually happening in the ground for a good 5 or 6 minutes, because the fans who were the early leavers right on the whistle were talking to me, and they weren't aware of it either. And then by the time people started saying, there's stuff going on in there, you need to get up there and have a look at it, by the time I got up there, it had sort of finished, so I never really saw it. But I've seen the video footage, I'm sure you have. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Robert, who we'll speak to in a second, who was in the away end, and Kevin, who I know was at the game, will have seen all this as well. How did it strike you? Because it struck me as being, at first, just a lot of probably younger kids from Wigan goading the City fans, who seemed very restrained, and then it seemed to turn a little bit.
It did turn nasty, and it seemed that way as well, and not just for fear of the of our own players and staff, but also, like you say, for the City fans. Now, again, it'd be great to hear what our fan has to say, and obviously what Kevin has to say, because, like, you know, as far as we were concerned, Ian, you know, it was a scary moment. I don't think any club particularly comes out well in this fracas, to be brutally honest.
Well, Robert was in the away end. He contacted me early today. He's somebody I've met a couple of times anyway. And you were in that away end, Robert, weren't you? Yeah, and I know it was an emotional night for you on many different levels, but do you want to talk us through what you saw?
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about the football, which I don't like, but last night, as soon as the game ended, obviously the Wigan fans rushed onto the pitch. They've got a right to celebrate, sure, but there were stewards there who were not restraining them, holding them back, anything. They were running onto the pitch unchallenged, and after they ran onto the pitch unchallenged, obviously they came towards where we were, and they were throwing bottles, they were picking up the advertising hoardings. Obviously we've been blamed on other media outlets for doing that, but initially it was the Wigan fans. Then, of course, the stadium PA was playing the music and sort of exacerbating the situation in a way and encouraging their fans to do that. Then they started encroaching more and more. And then eventually, obviously, some of these City fans who, you know, there were young kids there, whatever, were sort of really, really incensed by this and reacted. And the next thing I saw, and there's plenty of footage of this, was there was a certain police officer who seemed to be using quite a lot of excessive force with his baton against a City fan, which was quite troubling to see. Nobody wants to see that. I'm sure Wigan fans don't want to see that. And at the end of the day, I mean, if there were City fans causing problems, I want justice to deal with them just as much as I want justice to deal with any Wigan fans that stepped over the line and caused a lot of trouble. But scenes last night were very, very disturbing. And obviously, after the football match itself, there was a lot of emotion going on. But it just didn't seem to be dealt with in any way, any sort of correct way. It was not good at all from the officiating stewards and the police.
Can I challenge you on one thing? Because obviously I'm very aware, well aware of the fact that they played Wonderwall at the end over the PA, which I know some City fans have seen as being provocative, as sort of Mickey taking or whatever. Although, it's debatable as whether just playing a record at the end like that is, but I can see why that would have been interpreted like that. Apart from actually saying the final score, this is the bit I didn't hear, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but the only voice I heard on the PA said, Wigan Athletic 1, Manchester City 0. All right, in a celebratory way, but after that, did it stop or was there more? Are you saying there was more that happened? Because I didn't hear any more than that.
There was no more, nobody said, I mean, usually you hear, and I've heard it itself at City when we've been on the pitch, when they've said, can the fans please now leave the pitch? I didn't hear that. I might be wrong. But then they sort of played that Wigan song as well, the song where they did it during the game where the fans were singing it to each other, but they played that as well afterwards, and it just kept going and going and going. And I don't remember hearing anybody say, can the fans please now leave the pitch or for safety or anything like that. Usually these are the sort of things you hear the PA announcers repeating, but instead it was just this music, obviously, that sort of, in my opinion, encouraged the environment.
That's a fair point. I mean, the other thing that I observed, but again, as I explained before, I wasn't in that end when it was all at its height, as it were. But what I did notice from the footage that I've seen, and what I heard from one or two fans as well, was that there weren't too many stewards in that stand. And so when the Wigan fans came on, there was no barrier between the Wigan fans on the pitch and the City fans in the stand, who were very restrained from what I could see. And when the police eventually did come on, rather than face the invaders and try to push them back, they were facing the City fans as if the City fans were the problem. And that struck me as odd.
Yeah, it struck me as odd as well, but I think that's procedure to sort of, to keep the two sets of fans apart. We can't do anything about the massive Wigan fans, but at least the City fans who did restrain themselves and are still in the stand, they could contain that easier, I think. But as I said, it didn't stop the coins from being thrown, it didn't stop the bottles from being thrown, and it didn't stop the general atmosphere. It didn't dissipate the general atmosphere. It didn't help because it didn't feel as if the Wigan fans were being challenged by the authorities or by the steward staff. It just felt as if we were the ones being boxed in. We were the ones being pressured,
Obviously, the drama and the excitement from the Wigan fans will have provoked their pitching invasion. And I'm not going to ask this question only, if you like, to eliminate it as to whether this was in any way part of it. But we know that there was also a lot of anger from City fans about the refereeing performance of Anthony Taylor. A lot were questioning the sending off, and we will discuss it at more length, Lakey and I, with our guests a little bit later on. But we know the referee started to write on the yellow card and then eventually showed the red. Do you think that was in any way a contributing factor to the heat and the emotion of what happened at the end of the game?
It didn't help, but it was a game where we had 87% possession, I think it was, and we let slip at one point. I think Kyle Walker I think he was waiting for a whistle or something for a free kick that never came, and obviously Grieg went through and scored a goal. But we didn't win the game. We didn't have, although we had so much possession, we didn't really have a shot, I don't think, from my memory. Nothing really challenged their goalkeeper. Yes, the referee, I've seen footage since where he's got his yellow card out, seems to be writing on it, and then changes to a red. But one of the things that struck me was the first people to be around the referee when the whistle was blown for that Delph challenge were Wigan players. There were 7 or 8 Wigan players that were straight around the referee. And I think, people are saying, well, yeah, the earpiece and the linesman might be contributing to the decision. But in my opinion, the Wigan players themselves, I didn't think they were allowed to do that. I thought captains could go and challenge things or talk to the referee. But 7 or 8 Wigan players run straight to the referee and surround him. And then that, to me, is as much an influencer in his decision to overturn the yellow into a red as anything else. And it didn't help the night. It didn't really affect the game. I know that sounds weird, but it didn't really affect the game because we were still so in control of the game, just not getting that final ball or final attack, to convert it into a goal. But I'm not sure that the red card changed the game enough to say that that sparked all the problems. It's easy to sort of add that as a contributing factor as to why there were trouble at the end, but I think there was enough game left for us to win it, and we didn't. So
I think actually, to disagree with you slightly, I think it did impact on the game, only because our left-hand side, wasn't necessarily as effective as it could be. Having Fabian in there, stepping in and creating a little bit more opportunity, in wide areas. So you could argue that maybe it would have had more of an impact, but you're absolutely right. In terms of the game itself, having that much possession, and yet, and again, clear-cut chances. On the one hand, you can say that we were off the ball last night, but you also have to give credit to Wigan Athletic. They defended resolutely, and were so solid. And like I say, you always die for the cause in those situations. That's what they did, and you've got to say all credit to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take the defeat. I can handle the defeat. We played as well as not really as well as we could, but we saw it seemed like they give everything. The 10 players that were left on the pitch seemed like they give everything. We just couldn't find that clinical attack at the end. In the last 10 minutes, we just couldn't find that goal. But I agree with the shape of the team did get influenced by the decision, but I still felt we had enough and we were enough in control of the game to win, and obviously we didn't. And congratulations, so we're going to have to say that it's true, and hope they progress, as well as they can against what they got Southampton. I hope they prove to be the bogey team for a lot of sides, and not just us last night.
Well, Robert, thanks for coming on and explaining all that so eloquently. Thanks very much for your call. Now, listening to that was Kevin Parker, who's the General Secretary of the Manchester City Supporters Club. I know you're at the game, Kevin, but you told me earlier you left on the final whistle, but you'll have seen the footage. You've heard what Robert's got to say. What's your reaction as the sort of leader of the Supporters Club?
Hi Ian, hi Paul. Yeah, I left as soon as the final whistle went, and to be honest with you, I only picked up on what was happening when I heard it on the radio. Listen, I think Robert, to be fair, has summed up everything perfectly well. I understand that the Wigan supporters would go on the pitch to celebrate that victory. I think when we've won the Premier League on the last couple of occasions, our fans have been all over the pitch. So I do understand that, but I think Wigan themselves have a responsibility here. It wasn't long ago that they were played in the Premier League, so they actually know what's required to steward and police a game of that magnitude. And I think they just got it wrong, to be honest with you. I think at no stage when the fans came on, normally what happens is 5 minutes before the end of the game, the stewards would line up in front of where the away fans are. And that didn't happen to you. You'll have to excuse me, I'm out of breath. I was running up the stairs. And that didn't happen last night. And also, when all the fans run on the pitch, normally when you see that happen, and it does happen, I think the Rochdale fans ran on the pitch after the game against Spurs. One of the first things that would happen normally is that stewards would help the players get off the pitch. That didn't happen last night either. And I think Wigan themselves, not the fans, I think Wigan as a club need to accept responsibility that they didn't plan well enough for what might have happened had they beat City last night. And listen, their manager said during the week they've asked the Premier League, can they play 13 players? So they will probably turn around and say, we didn't expect it. But the reality is, this is the FA Cup. Shocks happen all the time. We ourselves have been beaten in this situation many, many times in the past. So I do understand the Wigan fans running on the pitch. I think they were out of order in some of the things we do. I would also have to say I was a little bit disappointed during the game because there were a couple of occasions towards the end when, from the City end, a couple of fans, if that's the right word to use them, threw a bottle onto the pitch at the Wigan players. And that's not great either, to be honest with you. So I think we ourselves as fans have to look at ourselves, within ourselves, and accept responsibility. Somebody somewhere was stood next to somebody who picked up a bottle, albeit a plastic bottle, but picked up a bottle and threw it on the pitch towards a Wigan player. So I'm not totally absolving City fans of blame on this one, but I do think Wigan as a club need to think about what they did last night and accept that they got it wrong.
Anything you want to add to that, Paul? Because I think Kevin's been very, very eloquent, really, in what he said there.
No, exactly that. I mean, Kevin's absolutely right as well. And we know that there's always going to be, both sides to any particular story. And I think he encapsulated that, perfectly, really, yeah.
I mean, I noticed a couple of things come on from the City end as well. And I know that once it started happening, things were probably thrown back that were thrown at the City fans. So that's why it escalates. But, Kevin, thanks. Just a quick word about the game, then. We haven't touched really much on the game yet. Do you worry about going forward? Is that a blip, or what went wrong last night? There's a question for you.
Listen, I don't worry about going forward. Listen, congratulations to Wigan. The reality was they had one chance and they took it. We had 25 shots on target. Somebody will tell me that only 5... I went 25 shots. Only 5 were on target. So we let ourselves down in terms of that. Listen, even though we had 83% possession, I think Paul's right. The fact that Delph was sent off did affect the structure of the team. And I think had we had 11 players with 83% rather than 10 players, it would have made a difference. But, we can't do anything about that now. Do I think that's going to affect us moving forward in the season? I don't think so. My only positive reaction to that would be, I hope it would be a positive impact in that the players who are playing on Sunday will look at last night and think, that's an opportunity lost to play in another cup final at Wembley, so let's make sure the one that we are playing in, that we make it count. But I don't think one result, people expected when we went to Anfield and got beat 4-3 that it was going to have an impact on our season. And the reality is that since we played that game in the Premier League, our points difference over the teams below us, we know who they are, but over the teams below us has increased. So do I think it will have a negative impact moving forward? No, I don't. But I also have to say, listen, congratulations to Wigan. It was fantastic for them. I have nothing but admiration for the way they played the game. They came out and knew exactly what they were going to do, and they managed to pull it off. So good luck to them against Southampton and whoever else they might play in the Cup this year.
Well, Kevin, it's ironic that you look on social media, as we always do, you can't help it, can you? You just get drawn to any comments about Manchester City. But one of the comments that I saw was quite ironic, was that, that Pep didn't play his strongest side. That was the reason why, we weren't successful last night. The fact of the matter is, as we know, that against Wigan Athletic, no disrespect to them, but, the squad that we have, in spite of, the conditions, even with 10 men, you would say that, with chances created and the players that we've got, we still should have been able to beat Wigan Athletic last night. No two ways about it.
Absolutely. And listen, such a reality as well. I saw something on Twitter earlier this afternoon. Somebody said, all this talk of the quadruple, we remember as fans when the quadruple was winning 4 games on the run.
And by the way, I'd have to say this, Kevin, I'm sure you'd agree with me, it isn't the City fans that have been talking about a quadruple. No, it's been the media that's been talking about it, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Listen, we're having an absolutely fantastic season. We're 16 points clear in the Premier League. Mind the gap. We're 16 points clear in the Premier League. We're in the League Cup, as I still call it, final on Sunday. We're still progressing in the Champions League. Okay, listen, it's disappointing last night. Of course it was, but it's not the end of our season. There would have been a time, actually, that losing that game last night at any stage in the FA Cup, almost the third round of the FA Cup, it would have been beaten. Our season would have been over apart from a fight against relegation. So let's get a touch of reality here. City fans are not the ones who, you're right, Ian, who were talking about the quadruple. We've got lots to aim for this season, and I'm sure, that we'll be smiling and singing, and maybe we might have our own controlled pitch invasion at the Etihad at the end of the season. Although I do have to say, even though I understand pitch invasions, I'm not a fan of them. As a fan who sits in the stand, I'd rather sit back and let the celebration get on with the team and the players and everybody else.
Absolutely. See you on Wembley way, Kev.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Take care, boys.
Cheers.
Kev.
Kevin Parker, the General Secretary of Manchester City Supporters Club. We're going to talk a lot more now about the game, about the decisions. We're going to move on from the crowd disturbances. Hopefully we've given that enough attention now, because we don't want to make the whole thing about that. And we're going to talk next to Rodney Marsh. Now, before we bring Rodney in, I just wanted to ask you, Paul, about these sort of key moments in the game. Obviously, major talking point was the Fabian Delph sending off. Now, there are two issues in my mind here. First of all, was it a sending off or not? Which certainly I can understand why that decision or that opinion is clouded by what happened with the decision of Anthony Taylor, the referee. I don't normally name referees, but I think it's significant in this case to get out the yellow card and appear to be writing on that, and then be swamped by managers and players and whatnot, and then appear to change his mind and produce a red card. So let's start, first of all, separate that if you can. Was it a red card? Was it a red card offence?
Well, again, Ian, you can. Luckily, when you watch it on the television, you see 3 or 4 different angles, and even with the different angles, one suggested a straight red, one suggested actually he played more of the ball there. You can see why it would be a yellow. Either way, you can see why it would be a red card. And if the roles had been reversed, that had been a challenge of somebody else on Fabian Delph, you would argue for a red card. Every team would. So first and foremost, you can't argue with Wigan wanting to try and get a Man City player sent off to give them a chance of winning the game, which obviously they did. So that was fair enough. Like you say, it was. To be fair, it was a surprise that Anthony Taylor would have been influenced by players, because he's an experienced referee now. He's not a new kid on the block anymore. So I'm quite surprised by that. Obviously, he's made the mistake. Every man and his dog saw the yellow card and right on the yellow card. So what happened in that split moment to make him change from yellow to a red, only he can explain. Certainly, the referees fraternity have been having a go at him. Mark Halsey last night was actually saying that it was unprofessional for him to have done that. Maybe he made a mistake, My actual question, though, again, is about decision-making. Because in the cold light of day, OK, Fabian's a passionate player. We're all passionate players. Did he need to make that challenge? Wigan were penned in their own box. We had 2 players that side. He could have, maybe just either just block the clearance or whatever, or just let him have it, win the ball back and start again. And it's those moments where you think to yourself, that could cost us the game, being sent off. Have I got the wherewithal to have that emotional restraint to think, do you know what? Is this the ball worth winning? Now, if it was in 6 yards out from his own goal, 100%. But you see, that's where, over time, players will learn, and hopefully Fabian will, because I don't think he needed to make that challenge. I think he has, ultimately, maybe, cost that particular game, although I've been guilty of it, other players have. In that moment, no one knows what you're thinking. So that was the first thing, obviously. Anthony Taylor, obviously everyone's questioned him, and then Fabian. Then we go on to the actual goal itself. Now, we know, Ian, first 10 minutes they were very nervous.
Before you go on to the goal...
Sorry, mate, yeah.
No need to apologise. Let's bring Rodney in and get him to tell us what he thinks of the yellow card fumble thing and the Fabian Delph challenge. So, Rodney, welcome along. Thanks a lot.
Hello, boys.
Hi, Rodney.
So, what did you make of the fact he went to a yellow first, and what did you actually think of the challenge? Was that a red card challenge?
I agree with Paul on most of what he said there. I think it was red. You didn't mention the fact that there was another really nasty tackle that should have been red earlier in the game.
That's the one on
Aguero.
Sergio Aguero.
I thought that was red as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Delph will be regretting. He's probably heard from the manager this morning as well, saying, what are you doing 80 yards from your own goal in the 47th minute of the first half, and you're getting sent off something ridiculous tackle. So I agree with Paul on that as well, Ian.
What about the referee? Obviously there's a lot of City fans who remember back to City playing Chelsea. How long ago was that? A year and a half ago, when I personally thought Anthony Taylor had a mare that day, and I said that in a video that I did at the time. And people have said he's from Wythenshawe, I think, and people reckon that his kids are all United fans, and this is all in the minds of City fans. And I remember at years and years ago that referees were certainly asked, not to referee games nearby. Is this a red herring? What is that an issue? Should he be taken off refereeing City and United games, or are we completely in the wrong ballpark here?
No. Hang on a second. You're asking my opinion. And Paul's got his opinion as well. I'd like to hear this as well from Paul. And that is this. The first thing is we should be talking about, in my opinion, I thought Wigan were magnificent. I thought they were outstanding throughout the game. They were under the cosh, the complete game. In the last 20 minutes, guys, I don't know if you saw the stats, Manchester City with 10 men in the last 20 minutes had 89% possession, and yet they couldn't break Wigan down. So you have to say that Wigan were magnificent, and all credit to them, number one.
No arguments with that.
No, none at all, Rodney. Absolutely right. I said it, at the start of the show that it was just that, they were robust, they were together, they were organised, they were selfless, they were aggressive when they needed to be, and they weren't afraid to put the foot through it. But at the same time, they did try to get up the pitch and get on the ball. And Grieg he did keep the ball quite well.
Right, and another point I want to make, guys, if you don't mind, is you talked about the goal, conceded the goal. When Pep Guardiola and his team and the backroom staff look at the video of that, they're going to see something they probably didn't see on the night. When the ball was played through to Walker, all he had to do was put his foot through the ball, right, number one. But as he let it go, and then he's running back towards his own goal, he was the last defender. There were the two central defenders of Man City were actually ahead of the ball. Now, where in the world do you play in a great defensive system where you defend, the last defender is the fullback? You never ever see that, do you, Paul?
No, you don't, Rodney. And again, all you can sort of say is that they were obviously high up the pitch, trying to sort of pressurise and trying to get the ball, as far as quickly as possible and play through the lines. But ultimately, thinking about Kyle Walker and the reason why he would let that ball go, I don't think he miscontrolled it, Rodney. I think it was quite simple. He thought that Bernardo Silva had given away a free kick and he stopped.
Agreed. And he did let the ball go intentionally, yeah. But my point being is, it's a mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a mistake by Walker. It's a mistake by the two central defenders. And when you look at the replay, which I was looking at last night, as what's the boy's name? The on-fire striker, Grieg, is it? What's his name? I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Grieg, yeah.
Grieg, yeah. As he ran away from Walker, the two central defenders, Man City central defenders, are 10 yards behind trying to catch up. And I thought, my goodness, that's something you see on a Sunday morning.
Well, something as well, Rodney, is like you say, in terms of basic defending, that positional sense, to be that far from the striker when you've obviously got two players against one, you normally be that one would be in front, one would be alongside, or maybe even just slightly behind. But like you say, in that situation, the players have just switched off.
Yep.
What's the bigger picture here, Rodney? I mean, obviously City are now in the latter stages of the Champions League. I know they've still got to beat Basel in the second leg, and that can't be taken for granted. But nevertheless, it looks as if they're in the quarter-finals where they're going to play the big boys. The two central defenders that you mentioned last night were... And I know the national media would make a big deal out of this, but they're both young, they're seen as the future of City. The national media would mention, and which is understandable, £100 million worth of signings. Kyle Walker is the first choice right back. Is that a worry going into the big games that are to come in the Champions League that defending that you've described wasn't ideal?
That's a great question, Ian. And when you play at the very highest level, European level or international level, in fact, it's all magnified, isn't it? It's all compounded by the quality of the forward players. So it is a concern. It is a concern. But I personally believe Manchester City are one of the top two best teams in Europe. I think Barcelona and Man City, in my opinion, and this is only in my opinion, I think they're both two magnificent football teams. So, yes, you could have a worry, but I don't think that one result against Wigan is going to set the standard for the whole season. I think they'll probably go on now and win a double, if not a treble.
On the basis of what we're discussing here, then, we know that there are two central defenders who didn't play, or two first choice, and others Tosin and Arabioyo, but Vincent Kompany and Otamendi weren't involved last night. In the big games of those four, which of the two? I mean, it might not be a black and white answer because there might be an argument to say certain types of fixtures. But who is the two you pick?
No, it's black and white for me. Company, Otamendi all day long. I don't know about you, Paul. Do you agree or not?
Well, yeah, I would actually, yeah. In terms of, obviously, Laporte is one that I would suggest that next season will come to the fore, especially, you know, being a lefty. Yeah. But certainly this season, and the way that we know that Vincent is a leader, and it allows Otamendi to just go and play and express himself. To be honest with you, Rodney, I'd actually say that Otamendi has been our best centre-half all season.
If that's the case from what you two are saying, then what does that say about John Stones? Because he's been there for 2 or 3 years now, and you're both saying that Vincent Kompany, who's having injury problems and can't play every week, and Nicolas Otamendi, who has been vilified by some City fans last season, and now the first choice defenders, and that John Stones isn't on that list.
Well, let me throw it back at you guys, and to your listeners out there in Radio Land in Manchester. You're picking the team for Sunday in the Carabao Cup. Who are you two central defenders? Who's central defenders for you, and who's the goalkeeper?
Kompany and Otamendi for me.
Yeah,
and I'd pick Edison if I'm being honest, but we know he's going to pick Bravo.
Well, he's going to pick Bravo, and like you say, I mean, it's something that has been questioned by lots of City fans in terms of those key moments, the big games where you want that silverware, you want that momentum. Are you going to pick your best team? And we know every City fan will say this, that Edison is by far and away our number one goalkeeper. So, you know, Pep's making a statement there, but, you know, you have to look at the bigger picture. And in terms of games, in terms of having two keepers that are going to be at the level, that's what Pep has always done, looking to have two players at least in every position, and therefore to give that player that chance to be part of the team means that there are going to be moments where he's going to take that number one spot. So, you know, it's an interesting one.
Would you agree with us then on what we're saying here, Rodney?
Well, I would agree, but the big question for me is when you make those changes and you rest players and you rest your goalkeeper, and you end up last night throwing on Kevin De Bruyne for the last 20 minutes, and Kevin De Bruyne comes into a 10-man team. I don't know if you spotted this, guys. Kevin De Bruyne was taking free kicks on the left, free kicks on the right. He was taking free kicks down the middle. He was taking corner kicks on the right. He was taking corner kicks on the left. The whole team seemed to evolve for the last 20 minutes. The whole team seemed to evolve around Kevin De Bruyne. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and that to me, it leads to an obvious question, which is, even though we've talked all season, and quite understandably and rightly, about how great this team is, the word team being a key, it felt as if a little bit last night, it started to focus in my mind. The question is, if without Kevin De Bruyne, are City the same team? And you know, when he came on, he made a difference immediately. And City fans today have been saying, really, he should have started that game and maybe gone off after an hour. And with 6 games since the Basel game and 6 games to Wembley, why was he rested last night?
Yeah, good question. How about you, Paul?
Well, again, you know, you look at the players on the pitch in the cold light of day, Rodney, we know that City could have even looked at potentially sticking in, you know, a Phil Foden or Brahim Diaz, and still should have had the quality to go to Wigan and beat them. You know, a Division 1 side, albeit at the top echelons of the division. And again, you know, you look at the pitch, you're looking at the atmosphere, the environment, going to 10 men, all those things, you know, you can't legislate for. And it's something which is really interesting, Rodney. If you look at the goals that City have conceded this season, I would suggest that 80% have been our own mistakes rather than great football that has turned us over.
I just add one point to that as well. Well said, Paul, by the way. I'd add one point to that. And I always look about my career at Man City. I was there for 4 years and under Malcolm Allison for a good part of that. And I got the most respect for Malcolm Allison as one of the greatest coaches that's ever coached the game. Malcolm had a saying, Ian, I don't know if you remember it. He used to say, whenever we concede a goal, and he was talking about Tommy Booth in those days, Alan Oakes and Mike Dorr and all that, he said, whenever we concede a goal, I look at where my central defenders are in the field. And last night, on the goal, as an example, and against Bristol City, by the way, Bristol City, a couple of weeks ago, the defenders are nowhere. And you can't have that at the very highest level, can you?
I can't argue with that. I mean, it's sometimes when a goal is conceded, you focus on the player you perceive to have made the mistake that led to the goal, and that's the only thing you look at. But I do notice, I think what you're saying is spot on. Then you know a lot more than me anyway, so it should be spot on. But sometimes it is the absence of somebody, of not being in the right position or anticipating a situation, which is just as damaging as the actual mistake.
Exactly.
Well, again, though, Rodney, at the same time, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that, all things considered, we've been excellent this season. John Stones has played some fantastic games, as has, all the back four and back three and back five and whatever formation we've looked at. What I like is the fact that it's a real learning curve. Okay, these boys, you shouldn't be expecting to make these kind of mistakes, but it happens. Otamendi, even against Leicester, that square pass that was given straight to, Jamie Vardy goes on and scores. But, for me, the real talented players learn quickly from these mistakes, and let's hope for City's sake that John, and Laporte, are going to recognise what you've just said, Rodney, as a key point is that remember to have that in the corner of your mind and always be on the front foot just in case the unexpected does happen.
And now we're going to fly over, in our minds at least, to Pennsylvania in the good old US of A and bring in Mr. Ian Bishop to tell us what he thought of it all, because obviously there was so much last night. I guess you were watching it, Ian. A lot of drama there at Wigan, wasn't there?
Definitely, mate, yeah. And I don't know where you've got him in Pennsylvania, mate. I'm sitting in my apartment looking down at the swimming pool in Florida.
Oh, right. Well, it says it's got Pennsylvania on our thing here. So, anyway, don't worry about it. Florida's just as lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, mate. How are you, Legs? You okay, mate?
Yeah, good, Bish. You okay?
Yeah, not too bad, mate.
Yeah, well, basically, what we were talking about last night, mate, we were just having that discussion with Rodney Marsh. Why don't you pick them up on the conversation there at all, pal? But we're talking about though the key moments. Me, Ian and I have chatted about it, and first and foremost, can we get your opinion on the red card situation?
Oh, mate, you know what? I think the responsibility lies with players today. All this falling around and diving around, I don't think refs know where they are. I'd say it every week. There's a mistake by a referee. I think the way the game's gone, and because of all that in this day and age, I think he has to give a red, mate. I'm not saying I agree with it, because it's just the way football's changed in my eyes. We can go on all we want, was when we played and how different it was, but sooner or later, somebody's got to get it at the source. I think the PFA have a responsibility, and the FA, to get into the players and fix them first. Because the players, I don't feel, care anymore what they do out on the field, whether it looks bad. And I'll be blunt about it. How stupid do you have to be not to know that nothing will be missed and there's cameras everywhere? I think it was just a full-blooded challenge. The one on Aguero was just as bad.
Yes.
The problem for me is that they're missing some, getting others, and this is where the problem lies.
So you were a fan of VAR then, by the sounds of it?
You know what, Cheesy? I don't even think that works, because the same nugget looking at it. He's going to come to the same conclusion because he's got the same rule book.
I can't argue with what you're saying here, Bish.
No, it doesn't matter how often he sees it. If he's got a certain outlook that it says in his rule book, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to work for some things, mate. You look at the last few that they've done. How long does it take?
But Bish, something, we can't be hypocritical though, because if the shoe's on the other foot and City fans and City players were around the referee and that's given for us, and we do think that in the cold light of day you can absolutely see why that could be a red card and was given as a red card. You can, so we can't be hypocritical and say that we wouldn't be doing the same thing, because City fans would have been, City players would have been around the referee, and certainly the fans would have been going, being incandescent in the stands if they hadn't been given a red card. So, and the manager as well, Pep was having a go, on the sidelines. But the bottom line was, it was a red card, and if it's going to be, it's got to be the same for everyone. There can't be that inconsistency, can there?
No, definitely not, mate. I agree with what you're saying there, but that's why I'm saying the responsibility lies with players. I don't think
you're not going to solve that problem, though, Ian, are you? Because players are players, and they will all. But yeah, you make a really good point about cameras being everywhere. How do they think they're going to get away with it?
Well, they do, obviously. I mean, you look at Dele Alli diving again.
Yeah, I was at that game, and from where I was, which is, you could argue, that referee instinct, you think, yeah, definitely a penalty. Then you watch the replays and you think, well, obviously it was, in my opinion, it wasn't a penalty, it was a dive. But he still did it, didn't he? And he knew the cameras would be watching that.
Well, that's because he's getting away with it. Still do it because they're getting away with it. Something's got to be done even after the fact.
You know, Bish, as well, you're right, is that, in our day, you would have been shamed and almost embarrassed to be doing that, because the bottom line is it's cheating, but every football fan and certain players will think, well, in 20, 30 years from now, when Tottenham's name's on the bottom of that cup, who'll remember me diving at that moment against Rochdale? Not many people.
Nobody will. But the thing for me is how do they feel about it, I don't think they care. I watched straight afterwards the celebrations after the penalty, and he was the first one there, and that disgusts me as much as the dive itself. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know who's going to fix it. But until you start doing something, punishing them after the fact, okay, the ref might get it wrong, the VAR might get it wrong, but when the FA look at it or they get someone to look at it, then you deal with the player himself. And you won't hurt him by fining him. You take him out of games. You ban him where you actually hurt your supporters. And let's hope that the players actually care about the supporters more than they do about the cheating and diving that goes on to win games.
You make a really good point. You make a really good point, Bish. The final one, mate, because I haven't got much time now, would be on the goal. So what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? So be it. Like, we all make mistakes. At the end of the day, people are making too much of it. He's made a mistake. Cal Walker's made a mistake, okay? I think it's a bit harsh blaming the goalie, which some commentators did over this side of the water. He's made one mistake. He's made an error of judgment.
Yeah.
So be it. How many times has that player put it round the post, over the bar, and it's forgotten? The fact is that people want to shoot down the best teams, and right now, I don't think it hurts City that much. No. I don't particularly care. He went and did exactly what Jose Mourinho did. Paul Cook, give him credit. He played how Jose Mourinho played at Old Trafford. And Paul Cook succeeded at it, and he never. So why aren't people now talking about how well Paul Cook and Wigan did, combating it and actually getting the results?
The fact is, Bish, if City had scored 2 goals, which you would have thought they'd be capable of doing against a League One side. No disrespect to Wigan, who played very, very well. And I've got a big soft spot for Wigan, by the way, so I've got nothing bad to say about them. If City had scored 2 goals, it wouldn't have mattered, would it? But, Bish, thanks very much for joining us. Enjoy Florida. Enjoy the sunshine.
Take care, Bish.
Cheers, mate. Tell Alex. See you, cheesy.
There you go, that's it, all done. Wembley this week, you're going down, obviously, Lakey.
I certainly am, yes.
See you on Wembley Way.
You will do.
And obviously, City win on Sunday, everything changed. All this is forgotten, it's all gone. Whatever happens, we'll be back next Tuesday, 6 till 7, to do it all again. See you next week.